Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. Hello, Mike Pope. Good to see you. You're the first one there. Hello, my friends, my lovelies, my lovers of the dark. I am so glad that you could join us tonight for story time. I wanted you to see my tie. Isn't it a scream? I seem to think so, anyway. So I want you to get ready. We're going to have story time in about 1 minute. We'll let the clock strike. Let's see here. Hello, hello, hello. Truthful Beauty. Hi from Texas. Hello. So we are going to be doing story time in just a few moments, but make certain you've got something soothing, something nice and comforting. Mary Jane King, good evening. Hello, my friend. So lovely to see all of my beautiful friends here tonight. Oh, here's the clock. I bumped it and turned it off, but that's okay. Well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, next week I will probably not be doing story time next week because Siobhan, hello. So story time next week will probably not be in session because I will be away in Boston, Massachusetts. I will be attending SatanCon. So it's a large satanic gathering. This is more specifically the Satanic Temple, though all Satanists are welcome. All of those who are supporters are welcome. And you know there's some infighting between the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple, and I understand, I get it. You know, it happens in every sort of sect. This one claiming that one is not true Christians, and they're the only ones, and it's the same thing. But truthfully, I'm not really with either the Satanic Temple nor am I with the Church of Satan. I am an independent Satanist, and I do what I do. But it's going to be fun. So next week, I will not be here on Friday because I will be busy in Boston. That's really the only announcement that I have, excepting for at some point, probably around midnight my time, I'm going to be having a special guest. I don't think it'll be here on YouTube. It might be on TikTok. It might very well be on Facebook. I don't know, but at some point, I'm going to have sometime tonight. I will be going live again, and I'll let you know on Facebook where to meet me, but I'll have a special guest. With that, ladies and gentlemen, boils and ghouls, guys and gals, and transgender pals. No, it's not Zach Baggins, but thank you. I love Zach. It's not Zach. He's a little bit of a higher echelon. Anyway, let's pick up about where we left off. I picked up the book and I went, I don't know why this doesn't sound familiar, but anyway, get yourself something nice to drink. Tonight's drink is brought to you by Arsenic and Old Lace. So smooth. Speak of the devil, the gin bottle. Cleophas found that Asmodeus had not vainly boasted of his agility. They darted through the air like an arrow from the bow, and were soon perched on the tower of San Salvador. Well, Signor Leandro said, the demon as they alighted, what think you now of the justice of those who, as they slightly rumble in some antiquated vehicle, talk of a devilish bad carriage? I must thereafter think them most unreasonable, politely replied Zambulo. I dare affirm that his Majesty of Castle has never travelled so easily, and then for speed at your rate, one might travel around the world, nor care to stretch a leg. You are really too polite, replied the devil, but can you guess now why I have brought you here? I intend to show you all that is passing in Madrid, and as this part of town is as good to begin with as any, you will allow that I could not have chosen a more appropriate situation. I am about, by my supernatural powers, to take away the roofs of the houses of this great city, and notwithstanding the darkness of night, to reveal to your eyes whatever is doing within them. As he spake, he extended his right arm, the roofs disappeared, and the student's astonished sight penetrated the interior of the surrounding dwellings, as plainly as if noonday sun shone over them. It was, say, Luis Velez de Guevara, like looking into a pasty from which a set of greedy monks had just removed the crust. The spectacle was, as you may suppose, sufficiently wonderful to rivet all the student's attention. He looked amazedly about him, and on all sides were objects which most intensely excited his curiosity. At length the devil said to him, Signor Don Salofis, this confusion of objects, which you regard with an evident pleasure, is certainly very agreeable to look upon, and I must render useful to you what would be otherwise but frivolous amusement, to unlock for you the secret chambers of the human heart. I will explain in what all these persons that you see are engaged. All shall be open to you. I will discover the hidden motives of their deeds and reveal to you their unbidden thoughts. Where shall we begin? See, do you observe this house to my right? Observe that old man who is counting gold and silver into heaps. He is a miserly citizen. His carriage, which he bought for next to nothing at the sale of an alcalde of the Cortes, and which, to save expense, still sports the arms of its late owner, is drawn by a pair of worthless mules, which he feeds according to the law of 12 tables. That is to say, he gives each daily 1 pound of barley. He treats them as the Romans treated their slaves, wisely, but not too well. It is now 2 years since he returned from the Indies, bringing with him innumerable bars of gold, which he has since converted into coin. Look at the old fool. With what satisfaction he gloats over his riches. And now see what is passing in an adjoining chamber of the same house. Do you observe the 2 young men with an old woman? Yes, replied Salofis. They are probably his children. No, no, said the devil. They are his nephews, and, what is better in their opinion, his heirs. And in their anxiety for his welfare, they have invited a sorceress to ascertain when death will come from their dear uncle. I'm sorry. Ascertain when death will take from them their dear uncle, and leave to them the division of his spoil. In the next house, there are a pair of pictures worth remarking. One is antiquated coquette, who is retiring to rest after disposing on her toilet, her hair, her eyebrows, and her teeth. The other is a gallant sexagenarian, who has just returned from a love campaign. He has already closed one eye in its case, and placed his whiskers and peruke on the dressing table. His valet is now easing him on the arm and one leg to put him into bed with the rest. If I may trust my eyes, cried Zambulo, I see in the next room a tall young damsel, quite a model for an artist. What a lovely form and air. I see, said the devil. Well, that young beauty is an elder sister of the gallant I have just described, and is a worthy pendant to the coquette who is under the same roof. Her figure, that you so much admire, is really good, but then she is indebted, for it is an ingenious mechanist whom I patronize. Her bust and hips are formed after my own patent, and it is only last Sunday that she generously dropped her bustle at the door of this very church on the occasion of charity sermon. Nevertheless, as she affects the juvenile, she has two cavaliers who ardently dispute her favor. Nay, they have even come to blows on the occasion. Madmen, two dogs fighting for a bone. Pray thee, laugh with me at an amateur consort, which is performing in the neighboring mansion. Concert which is performing in the neighboring mansion. An after-supper offering to Apollo. They are singing canatas. An old counselor has composed the air, and the words are by an alguazil, who does the amiable after the fashion among his friends, an ass who writes verses for his own pleasure and for the punishment of others. A harpsichord and clarinet form the accompaniment. A lanky chorister who squeaks marvelously takes the terrible, and the young girl with a hoarse voice the bass. What a delightful party, cried Don Salophus. Had they tried expressly to get up a musical extravaganza, they could not have succeeded better. Cast your eyes on that superb mansion, continued the demon, and you will perceive a nobleman lying in a splendid apartment. He has near his couch a casket filled with billets doux in which he is luxuriating, that the sweet nothings they contain may lull his senses gently to repose. They ought to be dear to him, for they are from Signora he adores, and who so well appreciates the value of her favors that she will soon reduce him to the necessity of soliciting the exile of a viceroyalty for his own support. Let us leave them to watch the stir they are making in the next house to the left. Can you distinguish a lady in a bed with red damask furniture? Her name is Donna Fabula. She is of high rank, and is about to present an heir to her spouse, the aged Don Toribio, whom you see by her side, endeavoring to soothe the pangs of his lady until the arrival of the midwife. Is it not delightful to witness so much tenderness? The cries of his dear better half pierce him to his soul. He is overwhelmed with grief. He suffers as much as his wife. With what care, with what earnestness does he bend over? Really, said Leandro, the man does appear deeply affected, but I perceive in the room above a youngster, apparently domestic, who sleeps soundly enough. He troubles himself not for the event, and yet it ought to interest him, replied Osmodius, for the sleeper is the first cause of his mistress's sufferings. But see, a little beyond, continued the demon, in that low room you may observe an old wretch who is anointing himself with lard. He is about to join the assembly of wizards, which takes place tonight between San Sebastian and Fontambaria. I would carry you thither in a moment, as it would amuse you, but that I fear I might be recognized by the devil who personates the goat. The devil, that devil and you then, said the scholar, are not good friends? No, indeed. You are right, replied Osmodius. He is that same Pilladoc of whom I told you. That scoundrel would betray me and soon inform the magician of my flight. You have perhaps had some other squabble with this gentleman? Precisely so, said the demon. Some 10 years ago, we had a second difference about the young Parisian who was thinking of commencing life. He wanted to make him a banker's clerk, and I, a lady killer. Our comrade settled the dispute by making him a wretched monk. This done, they reconciled us, we embraced, and from that time have been mortal foes. But have done with the bell assembly, said Don Salophus. I am not at all curious to witness it. Let us continue our scrutiny into what is before us. What is the meaning of those sparks of fire which issue from yonder cellar? They proceed from the most absurd occupations of mankind, replied the devil. The grave personage whom you behold near the furnace is an alchemist, and the flames are gradually consuming his rich patrimony, never to yield him what he seeks in return. Between ourselves, the philosopher's stone is a chimera that I myself invented to amuse the wit of man. Whoever seeks to pass those bounds which the laws of nature have prescribed for his intelligence, the alchemist's neighbor is an honest apothecary, who you perceive is still at his labors with his aged wife and assistant. You would never guess what they are about. The apothecary is compounding a progenitive pill for an old advocate who is to be married tomorrow. The assistant is mixing a laxative potion, and the old lady is pounding astringent drugs in a mortar. I perceive, in the house facing the apothecary, said Zambulo, a man who has just jumped out of bed and is hastily dressing. Pshaw, replied the spirit. He need not hurry himself. He is a physician, and has been sent for a prelate who since has retired to rest. About an hour, has absolutely coughed 2 or 3 times. But look a little further, in a garret on the right, and try if you cannot distinguish a man half-dressed, who is walking up and down the room dimly lighted by a single lamp. I see, said the student, and so clearly that I would undertake to furnish you with an inventory of his chattels, to wit, a truckle bed, a 3-legged stool, a deal table. The walls seem to be daubed all over with black paint. That exalted personage, said Asmodeus, is a poet, and what appears to you as black paint are tragic verses, with which he has ornamented his apartment, being obliged, for want of paper, to commit his effusions to the wall. By his agitation and frenzied air, I conclude he is now busily engaged on some work of importance, said Don Salophus. You are not far out, replied the devil. He only yesterday completed the last act of an interesting tragedy entitled The Universal Deluge. He cannot be reproached with having violated the unity of place, at all events, as the entire action is limited to Noah's Ark. I can assure you, it is a first-rate drama. All the animals talk as learnedly as professors. It, of course, must have been a dedication upon which he has been laboring for the last 6 hours, and he is, at this moment, turning the last period. It will be indeed a masterpiece of adultery composition. Every social and political virtue, every grace that can adorn, all that tends to render man illustrious, either by his own deeds or those of his ancestors, are attributed to his object. Never was a praise more lavishly bestowed, never was incense burnt more liberally. For whom, then, of all the world is so magnificent an apotheos intended? Why, replied the demon, the poet himself has not yet determined that. He has put in everything but the name. However, he hopes to find some vain noble who may be more liberal than those to whom he has dedicated his former productions, although the purchasers of imaginary virtues are becoming every day more rare. It is not my fault that it is so, for it is a fault corrected in the wealthy patrons of literature, and a great benefit rendered to the public, who were certain to be deluged by trash from the Swiss of the press, so long as books were written merely for the produce of their dedications. Apropos of this subject, added the demon, I will relate to you a curious anecdote. It is not long since an illustrious lady accepted the honor of a dedication from a celebrated novelist who, by the by, writes so much in praise of other women that he thinks himself at liberty to abuse the one peculiarly his own. The lady in question was anxious to see the address before it was printed, and not finding herself described to her taste, she wisely undertook the task and gave herself all those inconvenient virtues which the world so much admires. She then sent it to the author, who of course had weighty reasons for adopting it. "Hallo!" cried Leandro. "Surely those are robbers who are entering that house by the balcony." "Precisely so," said Asmodeus. They are brigands, and the house is a banker's. Watch them. You will be amused. See, they have opened the safe and are ferreting everywhere, but the banker has been before them. He set out yesterday for Holland and has taken with him all the contents of his coffers for fear of accidents. They may make a merit of their visit by informing his unfortunate depositors of their loss. "There is another thief," said Zumbulo, "mounting by a silken ladder into a neighboring dwelling." "No, you are mistaken there," replied the devil. "At all events, it is not gold he seeks. He is a marquis who would rob a young maiden of a name, of which, however, she is not unwilling to part. Never was a stand and deliver more graciously received. He, of course, has sworn he will marry her, and she, of course, believes him, for the Marquis's promise have unlimited credit upon love's exchange." "I'm curious to learn," interrupted the student, "what that man in the nightcap and dressing-gown is about. He is writing very studiously, and near him is a little black figure who occasionally guides his hand." "He is a registrar of civil courts," replied the demon, "and to oblige a guardian is, for a consideration, altering a decree made in favor of the ward. The gentleman in black, who seems enjoying the sport, is Griphael, the registrar's devil." "Griphael, then," said Don Cleophas, "is a sort of deputy to Flegel, for, as he is spirit of the bar, the registrars are doubtless included in his department." "Not so," replied Asmodeus. "The registrars have been thought deserving of their peculiar demon, and I assure you they find him quite enough to do. Near the registrar's house you will perceive a young lady on the first floor. She is a widow, and then the man whom you see in the same room is her uncle, who lodges in an apartment over hers. Admire the bashfulness of the dame. She is ashamed to put on her chemise before her aged relative. So modestly she seeks the assistance of her lover, who is hidden in her dressing-room. In the same house with the registrar lives a stout graduate who has been lame from his birth, but who has not his equal in the world for pleasantry. Voluminous, so highly spoken of the Ciaro, for his delicate yet pungent wit. What a fool to him! He is known throughout Madrid as the bachelor donoso, or the fastidious graduate, and his company is sought by old and young at the court and in the town. In short, wherever there is or should be conviviality, he is so much the rage that he has discharged his cook, as he never dines at home, to which he seldom returns until long after midnight. He is at present with the Marquis of Alcazinas, who is indebted for this visit to chance only." "How to chance?" interrupted Leandro. "Why," replied the demon, "this morning about noon, the graduate's door was besieged by at least half a dozen carriages, each sent for the especial honor of securing his society. The bachelor received and assembled pages in his apartment, and, displaying a pack of cards, thus addressed them. My friends, as it is impossible for me to dine in 6 places at one time, and as it would not appear polite to show an undue preference, these cards shall decide the matter. Draw. I will dine with the king of clubs. What object, said Don Silphus, has yonder cavalier, who is sitting at the door on the other side of the street? He is waiting for some pretty waiting woman to usher him to his lady's chamber. Oh, no, no, answered Osmodius. He is a young Castilian, whose modesty exceeds his love. So, after the fashion of the gallants of antiquity, he has come to pass the night at his mistress's portal. Listen to the twang of that wretched guitar, with which he accompanies his tender strains. On the second floor you may behold his inamorata. She is weeping as she hears him, but it is for the absence of his rival. You observe that new building, which is divided into 2 wings. One is occupied by the proprietor, the old gentleman, whom you see now pacing the apartment, now throwing himself into an easy chair. Zambulo, who is he? If one may judge by the splendor which is displayed in his mansion, he is a grandee of the first order. Nevertheless, said Asmodeus, he is but an ancient clerk of the treasury, who has grown old in such lucrative employment as to enable him to amass 4 millions of reals. As he has some compunction of conscience for the means by which all this wealth has been acquired, and as expects shortly to be called upon to render his account in another world, where bribery is impracticable, he is about to compound for his sins in this, by building a monastery, which done, he flatters himself that peace will revisit his heart. He has already obtained the necessary permission, but as he has resolved that the establishment shall consist of monks who are extremely chaste, sober, and of the most Christian humility, he is embarrassed in the selection. He need not build a very extensive convent. The other wing is inhabited by a fair lady, who has just retired to rest after the luxury of a milk bath. This voluptuary is a widow of knight who, of the order of St. James, who left her at his death her title only, but fortunately her charms have secured for her valuable friends in the persons of 2 members of the Council of Castile, who generously divide her favors and the expenses of her household. Hark, cried the student, surely I hear the cries of distress. What dreadful misfortune has occurred? A very common one, said the demon. 2 young cavaliers have been gambling in a hell. The name is a scandal on the infernal regions, which you perceive so brilliantly illuminated. They quarrelled upon an interesting point of the game, and naturally drew their swords to settle it. Unluckily, they were equally skilful with their weapons, and are both mortally wounded. The elder is married, which is unfortunate, and the younger an only son. The wife and father have just come in time to receive their last sighs, and it is their lamentation. Unhappy boy, cries the fond parent over the still breathing body of his son. How often have I conjured thee to renounce this dreadful vice? How often have I warned thee it would one day cost thee thy life? Heaven is my witness that the fault is none of mine. Men, added the demon, are always selfish, even in their griefs. Meanwhile, the wife is in despair, although her husband has dissipated the fortune she brought him on their marriage. Although he has sold to maintain his shameful excesses, her jewels, and even her clothes, not a word of reproach escapes her lips. She is inconsolable for her loss. Her grief is vented in frantic exclamations mixed with curses on the cards and the devil who invented them. on the place in which her husband fell, and on the people who surround her, and to whom she fondly attributes his ruin. How much to be lamented, interrupted the student, is the love of gaming which possesses so large a portion of mankind. In what an awful state of excitement does it plunge its victims! Heaven be praised. I am not included in their legion. You are in high feather, replied the demon, in another whose exploits are not much more ennobling and scarcely less dangerous. Is the conquest of a courtesan a glory worth achievement? Is the possession of charms common to a whole city worth the peril of a life? Man is an amusing animal. The vision of a whole would enable him to discover the vices of his fellows, while that of the vulture could scarce detect a folly of his own. But let us turn to another affecting spectacle. You can discern in the house just beyond the one we have been contemplating a fat old man extended on a bed. He is a canon who is now in the fit of apoplexy. The two persons whom you see in his room are said to be his nephew and his niece. They are too much afflicted by his situation to be able to assist him, so are securing his valuable effects. By the time this is accomplished, he will be dead, and they will be sufficiently recovered, and at leisure to weep over his remains. Close by, you may perceive the funeral of two brothers who, seized with the same disorder, took equally successful but different means of ensuring fatality. One of them had the most utter confidence in his apothecary. The other eschewed the aid of medicine. The first died because he took all the trash his doctor sent him. The last because he would take nothing. Well, that is very perplexing, said Leonardo. What is a poor sick devil to do? Why, replied Asmodeus, that is more than the one who has the honor of addressing you can determine. I know for certain that there are remedies for most ills, but I am not so sure that they are good physicians to administer them when necessary. And now I have something more amusing to unriddle. Do you not hear a frightful din in the next street? A widow of 60 was married this morning to an Adonis of 17, and all the merry fellows of the part of town have assembled to celebrate the wedding by concert of pots and pans, marrow bones and cleavers. You told me, said the student, that these matches were under your control. At all events, you had no hand in this. No, truly, answered the demon, not I. Had I been free, I should not have meddled with them. The widow had her scruples, and has married for no better reason that she may enjoy, without remorse, the pleasure she so dearly loves. These are not the unions I care to form. I prefer troubling people's consciences to setting them at rest. Notwithstanding this charming serenade, said Zambulo, it seems to me that it is not only the concert performing in the neighborhood. No, said the cripple. In a tavern in the same street, a lusty Flemish captain, a chorister of the French opera, and an officer of the German guard are singing a trio. They have been drinking since 8 in the morning, and each deems it a duty to his country to see the others under the table. Look for a moment on the house which stands by itself nearly opposite to that of the apoplectic canon. You will see there 3 very pretty but very notorious courtesans enjoying themselves with as many young courtiers. They are indeed lovely, exclaimed Don Silophus. I am not surprised that they should be notorious. Happy are the lovers whom possess them. They seem, however, very partial to their present companions. I envy them their good fortune. Why are you very green? Replied the demon. Their faces are not disguised with greater skill than are their hearts. However prodigal of their caresses, they have not the slightest tenderness for their foolish swains. Their affection, it's bounded to the purses of their lovers. One of them has just secured the promise of a liberal establishment, and the others are prepared with settlements, which they are in expectation of securing ere they part. It is the same with them all. Men vainly ruin themselves for sex. Gold buys not love. The well-paid mistress soon treats her lover as the husband, but it is a rule which I found necessary to establish in my code of intrigue. But we will leave these fools to taste the pleasures they so dearly purchase, while their valets who are waiting in the street console themselves with the pleasing anticipation of enjoying them gratis. The demon now directed the student's attention to another part of the city. You see, he continued, that house which is directly under us, it contains something curious enough. A man loaded with debt and sleeping profoundly. Of course, then, said Leandro, he is a person of distinction. Precisely so, answered Asmodeus. He is a marquis, possessed of 100,000 ducats per annum, but whose expenses, nevertheless, exceed his income. His table and his mistress require that he should support them with credit. But that causes him no anxiety. On the contrary, when he opens an account with a tradesman, he thinks that the latter is indebted to him. It is you, said the other day to the draper, it is you that I shall henceforth trust with execution of my orders. It is a preference which you owe to my esteem. While the Marquis enjoys so tranquilly the sweet repose of which Mordus interrupted Don Colosif, while the Marquis enjoys so tranquilly the sweet repose of which he deprives his creditors, look at a man who— Stay, Signor Asmodeus, interrupted Don Salofis hastily. I perceive a carriage in the street, and cannot let it pass without asking what it contains. Hush, said the cripple, lowering his voice, as though he had feared he should be heard. Learn that vehicle conceals one of the most dignified personages in this kingdom, a president, who is going to amuse himself with an elderly lady of Austria, who is devoted to his pleasures. That he may not be known, he has taken the precaution of imitating Caligula, who, on a similar occasion, disguised himself in a wig. But to return to the picture, I was about to present to your sight, when you interrupted me. Observe, in the very highest part of the mansion, where sleeps the Marquis, a man who is writing in a chamber filled with books and manuscripts. He is probably, said Zambulo, the steward laboring to devise some means for his discharging his master's obligations. Excellent, exclaimed the devil. That indeed forms a great part of the amusement of such gentry of the service of noblemen. They seek rather to profit from the derangement of their master's affairs than to put them in order. He is not, then, the steward whom you see. He is an author. The Marquis keeps him in his house to obtain the reputation of a patron of literature. This author, replied Don Sleophis, is apparently a man of immense eminence. Judge for yourself, replied the demon. He is surrounded by 1,000 volumes, and it's composing one on natural history, in which there will not be a line of his own. He pillages these books and manuscripts without mercy, and although he does nothing but arrange and connect his lacernies, he has more vanity than the most original writer upon earth. You are not aware, continued the spirit, who lives 3 doors from this mansion. It is La Chicona, the very lady who acted so honorable a part in the story of the Count de Belfort. Ah, said Leandro, I am delighted to behold her. The dear creature, so considerate for youth, is doubtless one of the two old ladies whom I perceive in that room. One of them is leaning with both her elbows on the table, looking attentively at the other, who is counting out some money. Which of them is La Chicona? Not the one who is counting, said the demon. Her name is Pebrada, and she is a distinguished member of the same profession. They are indeed partners, and are at this moment dividing the profits of an adventure which, by their assistance, has terminated favorably. La Pebrada is the more successful of the two. She has among her clients several rich widows, who subscribes to her daily register. What do you mean by her register? Interrupted the student. Why, replied Asmodeus, it contains the names of all the handsome foreigners, and particularly Frenchmen, who come to Madrid. The instant La Perbada hears of an arrival, away she posts to the hotel of the newcomer, to learn every particular as his country, birth, parentage, and education, his age, form, and appearance, all which are duly reported to her subscribers, and if, on reflection, the heart of any of her widows is inclined to an acquaintance, she adroitly manages a speedy interview with the stranger. That is extremely convenient, replied Zambulo, smiling, and in some sort of very proper, for in truth, without these kind of ladies and their agents, the youthful foreigner who comes without introductions to Madrid would lose an immense deal of time in gaining them. But tell me, are there in other countries widows as generous and women as intriguing? Capital, exclaimed the devil. If there are, why can you doubt it? I should be unworthy of my demonship if I neglected to provide all the large towns with them in plenty. Cast your eyes upon Chichona's neighbor, yon printer, who is working at his press alone. He has dismissed the devils in his employ these 3 hours, and he is now engaged for the night on a work which he is printing privately. Ah, what may it be? Said Leandro. It treats of insults, replied the demon, and endeavors to prove that religion is preferable to honor, and that it is better to pardon than to avenge an affront. Oh, the scoundrel, exclaimed the student. Well, may he print in secret his infamous book. Its author had better not acknowledge his production. I would be one of the first to answer it with horsewhip. What can religion forbid the preservation of one's honor? Let us not discuss that point, interrupted Asmodeus, with a malicious smile. It appears that you have made the most of the lectures on morality. You listen to Alcala, and I give you joy of the result. You may say what you please, interrupted Cleophas in his turn, and so may the writer of his wretched absurdity. But though his reasonings were clear as the noonday sun, I should despise him and them. I am a Spaniard, and nothing is to me so delightful as revenge. And, by the by, since you have pledged yourself to satisfy me for the perfidy of my mistress, I call on you at once to keep your promise. I yield with pleasure, said the demon, to the wrath which agitates your breast. Oh, how I love those noble spirits who follow without scruple the dictates of their passions. I will obey your will at once, and indeed the hour to avenge your wrongs is come. But first, I wish to show you something which will amuse you vastly. Look beyond the printing office and observe with attention what is passing in an apartment hung with a drab cloth. I perceive, said Leandro, 5 or 6 women who are, with eagerness, offering vials of something to a sort of valet, and they appear desperately agitated. They are, replied Asmodeus, devotees who have great reason to be agitated. There is in the next room a sick inquisitor. This venerable personage, who is about 35 years old, is attended by two of his dearest penitents with untiring watchfulness. One is concocting his gruel, while the other, at his pillow, is employed in keeping his head warm, and is covering his stomach with a kind of blanket made at least 50 lambskins. What on earth is the matter with him, then? Asked Zambulo. He has a cold in his head, answered the devil, and there is danger lest the disorder should extend to his lungs. The ladies whom you see in his antechamber have hastened on the alarm of his indisposition with all sorts of remedies. One brings to allay his apprehended cough syrups of jubilees, mallows, coral, and colt's foot. Another to preserve the said lungs of his reverence, syrups of long life, speedwell, armanoth, and the elixir vital. This one, to fortify his brain and stomach, has brought balm, cinnamon, and treacle waters, besides gute vita, and the essence of nutmeg and the ambergris, that offers anacardine and bezardoric confections, while a fifth carries tinctures of cloves, gillyflowers, sunflowers, and of coral and emeralds. All these zealous penitents are boasting of the valet of the virtues of the medicines they offer, and they each by turns, drawing him aside and slipping a ducat in his hand, whispers in his ear, Lawrence, my dear, Lawrence, manage so, I beg of you, that what I bring for the dear man may have the preference. By Jupiter, cried Don Cleophas, it must be allowed that the inquisitors, even sick inquisitors, are happy mortals. I can answer for that, replied Asmodeus. I almost envy them their lot, myself, and like the son of Philip Macedon, who once said that he would have been Diogenes if he had not been Alexander. I can unhesitatingly say that if I were not a devil, I would be an inquisitor. But senior student, continued he, let us go, let us away, to punish the ingrate who so ill requited your tenderness. Zambulo instantly seized the end of the demon's cloak, and a second time was whirled with him through the air until they alighted on the house of Donna Tomasa. This frail damsel was seated at the table with 4 gentlemen who, a few hours before, had so eagerly sought the acquaintance of Don Cleophas on the roof of her house. He trembled with rage as he beheld them feasting on the brace of partridges and a rabbit, which, with some choice wine, he had sent to the traitress for his own supper. And, to add to his mortification, he perceived that the joy reigned in the repast, and that it was evident by the deportment of the lady that the company of those scoundrels was much more agreeable to her than that of himself. Oh, that the wretches, he cried in a perfect fury, to see them enjoying themselves at my expense. Vastly pleasant, is it not? Why, I must confess, replied the demon, that you have witnessed spectacles more pleasing, but he who rejoices in the favors of such fair ones must expect to share them. This sort of thing was happened 1,000 times, especially in France, among the among the abbess, the gentlemen and the long robe and the financiers. If I had a sword, though, said Leandro, I would fall upon the villains and spoil their sport for them. You would be hardly matched, replied the demon. That what were one among so many? Leave your revenge to me. I will manage it better than you could. I will soon set them together by their ears. in aspiring each of them with a fit of tenderness for your mistress, their swords will be out in no time, and you will be delighted with the uproar." Osmodius had no sooner spoken than he breathed forcibly, and from his mouth issued a violet-colored vapor, which descended tortuously like a fiery serpent, and spread itself around the table of Donna Tomasa. In an instant, one of her guests, more inflammable than his companions, rose from his seat and, approaching the lady, embraced her amorously, when the others, in whom the spirit had begun to work, hastened together to snatch from him the dainty prize. Each claimed a preference. Words ensued, a jealous rage possessed them, blows succeeded, and, as the devil had foretold, they drew their weapons and commenced a furious combat. In the meanwhile, Donna Tomasa exerted her lungs, and the neighborhood was speedily alarmed by her cries. They call for police. The police arrive. They break open the door and find the two of the Hectors extended on the floor. They seize upon the others and take them with the Helen of the party to prison. In vain did they weep. In vain did she tear her locks and exclaim in despair. The tears of unfortunate beauty had no more effect on the cavaliers who conducted her than they had on the former knight Zambulo, who almost died with laughter, in which the god of love most unnaturally joined them. "Well," said the demon to the student, "are you content?" "No, no," replied Don Cleophas. "To satisfy me in full, place me upon the prison, that I may have the pleasure of beholding in their dungeon the miserable who trifled with my love. I feel for her now a hatred which exceeds even the affection with which she formerly inspired me." "Be it so," said the devil. "You shall ever find me a slave to your will, though it interfered with mine and my interests, provided always that it is safe to indulge you." They flew through the air and were on the prison before the officers arrived with their captives. Two assassins were at once consigned to one of the lowest deeps, while Tomasa was led to a bed of straw which she was to share with 3 or 4 other abandoned women, who had fallen into the hands of justice the same day, and with whom she had destined to be transported to the colonies, which a grateful mother country generally endows with his description of female inhabitants. "I am satisfied," said Zambulo. I've tasted a delicious revenge, my dear Tomosa will not pass the night quite so pleasantly as she had anticipated." "Were you this moment at the gate of the sun," said the devil, "you would be horror-stricken at the spectacle which is now exhibiting through the negligence of a domestic mansion is on fire, which in its rage has already reduced to ashes the magnificent furniture it contains, and threatens to consume the whole building. But great as might be his loss, Don Pedro de Escanolo, to whom the house belongs, would not regret it for a moment, could he but save his only daughter, Serafina, who is likely to perish in the flames." Don Cleophas, expressing the greatest anxiety to see this fire, the cripple transported him in an instant to the gate of the sun, and placed him in the house exactly opposite to which that was burning. In the street beneath them, nothing was to be heard but a confused noise arising from cries of fire from one half of the crowd, and the more appropriate one of water from the other. As soon as Leandro was able to comprehend the scene, he saw that the grand staircase which led to the principal apartments of Don Pedro's mansion was all in flames, which also were issuing with clouds of smoke from every window in the house. "The fire at its height," said the demon, It has just reached the roof, and its 1,000 tongues are spitting in the air millions of brilliant sparks. It's a magnificent sight, so much so that the persons who have flocked from all parts around it to assist in extinguishing the flames are awed into helpless amazement. You may discern in the crowd the spectators an old man in a dressing gown. It is the Signor di Ascolano. Do you not hear his cries and lamentations? He is addressing the men who surrounded him, and conjuring them to his rescue his child, but in vain does he implore them. In vain does he offer all his wealth. None dares expose his life to save the ill-fated lady who is only 16, and whose beauty is incomparable. The old man is in despair. He accuses them of cowardice. He tears his hair and beard. He beats his breast. The excess of his grief has made him almost mad. Serafina, poor girl, abandoned by her attendants, has just swooned with terror in her own apartment, where in a few minutes a dense smoke will stifle her. She is lost to him forever. No mortal can save her. Ah, Signor Osmodius, exclaimed Leonardo Perez, prompted by feelings of generous compassion. If you love me, yield to the pity which desolates my heart. Reject not my humble prayer when I entreat you to save this lovely girl from the horrid death which threatens her. I demand it. As the price of service I rendered, but now you. Do not this time oppose yourself to my desires. I shall die with grief if you refuse me. The devil smiled on, witnessing the profound emotion of the student. The fire warms you, Signor Zambulo, said he. Verily, you would have made an exquisite knight-errant. You are courageous, compassionate for the sufferings of others, and particularly prompt in the service of sorrowing damsels. You would be just the man now to throw yourself in the midst of the furnace yonder, like an Amadis, to attempt the deliverance of the beauteous Serafina, and to restore her safe and sound to her disconsolate father. Would to heaven, replied Don Cleophas, that it were possible, I would undertake the task without hesitation. Pity that your death, resumed the cripple, would be the sole reward of the noble an exploit. I have already told you that human courage can avail nothing on the occasion. Well, I suppose to gratify you, I must meddle in the matter, so observe how I shall set about it. You can watch from hence all my operations. He had no sooner spoken with these words than, borrowing the form of Leandro Perez, to the great astonishment of the student, he alighted unobserved amid the crowd, which he elbowed without ceremony, and quickly passing through it, rushed into the fire as into his natural element. The spectators, who beheld him, alarmed at the apparent madness of the attempt, uttered a cry of horror, "What insanity," said one. It is possible that interest can blind a man to such an extent as this. None but downright idiot could have been tempted by any proffered recompense to dare such certain death. The rash youth, said another, must be the lover of Don Pedro's daughter, and in the desperation of his grief was resolved to save his mistress or to perish with her. In short, they predicted for him the fate of the impediciles. When a minute afterward they saw him emerge from the flames with Serafina in his arms, the air resounded with acclamations, and the people were loud in their praises of the brave cavalier, who had formed so noble a feat. When the rashness ends in success, critics are silent, and so in prodigy now appeared the assembled multitude as a very natural result of a Spaniard's daring. As the lady was still insensible, her father did not dare to give himself up to joy. He feared that, although thus miraculously delivered from the fire, she would die before his eyes from the terrible impression made upon her mind by the peril she had been encountered. He was, however, soon reassured when, recovering from her swoon, her eyes opened, and looking an old man, she said to him with an affectionate voice, "Signor, I have had more occasion for affliction than rejoicing at the preservation of my life. Were not yours also in safety?" "Ah, my child," replied her father, embracing her, "nothing is lost since you are saved. But let us thank," exclaimed he, presenting to her the double of Cleophas, "let us testify our gratitude to this young cavalier. He is your preserver. It is to him you owe your life. How can we repay that debt? Not all that I possess would suffice to cancel the obligation he has conferred upon us." To these observations the devil replied with an air which would have done Don Cleophas credit. "Signor, I am noble, and a Castilian. I seek no other reward for the service I have had the happiness to render you than the pleasure of having dried your tears, and of having saved from the flames the lovely object which they threatened to devour. Surely such a service is its own reward." The disinterestedness and generosity of their benefactor raised for him the highest feelings of admiration and esteem in the breast of Signor Escalando, who entreated him to call upon them and offered him his warmest friendship. The devil replied in fitting terms to the frank advances of the old man, and, after many other compliments had passed, the father and daughter retired to a small building which remained uninjured. One moment. "Signor Asmodeus, have my eyes deceived me? Were you not but now in my shape and figure?" "Excuse the liberty," replied the cripple, "and I will tell you the motive for this metamorphosis. I have formed a grand design. I intend that you should marry Seraphina, and, under your form, I have already inspired her with violent passion for your lordship. Don Pedro also is highly satisfied with you, because I told him that it is in rescuing his daughter I had no other object than to render them both happy, and that the honor of having happily terminated so perilous an adventure was a sufficient reward for a Spanish gentleman. The good man has a noble soul, and will not easily be outdone in generosity, and he is at this moment deliberating within himself whether he shall not give you his daughter the most worthy return he can make to you for having saved her life." Let's see how many more we have on this one. You know what? We'll go ahead and finish this one because we've only got a few more pages of this story. "Why, what's the matter now?" exclaimed the student. "What wonderful emotion agitates you thus, and chains your willing tongue?" "Ah, Signor Leandro," answered the demon, with tremulous voice, "what misery for me! The magician who kept me prisoned in my bottle has discovered that I am absent without leave, and prepares even now such mighty spiritings to call me back to his laboratory as I must fain obey." "Alas!" exclaimed Zambulo, quite affected, "I am mortified beyond expression. What a loss I am to suffer! Must we, then, my dear Asmodeus, separate forever?" "I trust not," replied the devil. "The magician may require some office of my ministry, and if I have the fortune to assist him in the projects, perhaps out of gratitude, he may restore me to liberty. Should that arrive, as I hope it may, rely on my rejoicing you at once, on the condition, however, that you reveal not to mortal ears what has this night passed between us. Should you be weak enough to confide this to anyone, I warn you," continued Asmodeus emphatically, "that you will never see me any more." I have no consolation in leaving you, he resumed, which is that at least I have made your fortune. You will marry the lovely Seraphina, into whose bosom it has been my business to instill a doting passion for your lordship. The Signor Don Pedro de Ascalano, too, has made up his mind to bestow her hand upon you, and do you take care not to let so splendid a gift escape your own. But mercy on me, he concluded, I hear already the potent master who constrains me. All hell resounds with echoes of the fearful words pronounced by his redoubtable magician. I dare not stay a moment longer. Farewell, my dear Zambulo. We may meet again. As he ceased, he embraced Don Cleophas, and, after having dropped the student in his own apartment on his way to the laboratory, disappeared. Upon the retreat of Osmodius, the student, feeling fatigued at having passed all night upon his legs, and by the extraordinary bustle in which he had been occupied, undressed himself and went to bed. Agitated as his mind may be supposed to have been, it is no wonder that he lay for some time restless, but at last, paying with compound interest to Morpheus the tribute which all mortals owe to him some bar majesty, he fell into a death-like sleep, in which he passed the whole of that day and following night. 24 hours had he been thus lost to the world, when Don Cleophas de Lillard, a young cavalier whom he numbered among his friends, entered his chamber, singing out lustily, "Hello, Signor Don Cleophas, get up with you." At this salutation Zambulo awoke. "There you are," said Don Luis to him, "that you have been in bed since yesterday morning." "Impossible!" exclaimed Leandro. "Not the less true for that," replied his friend. "Twice have you slept the clock's dull round. All the inmates of the house assure me of this fact." The student, astonished at the trance from which he emerged, feared at first that his adventures with Asmodeus were but an illusion. He could not, however, persist in this belief, and when he recalled to himself certain circumstances of his intercourse with the demon, he soon ceased to doubt of its reality. But to make assurance doubly sure, he rose, dressed himself quickly, and went out with Don Luis, whom he took without saying why, in the direction of the Gate of the Sun, arrived there, and perceiving the mansion of Don Pedro almost reduced to ashes, Don Cleophas feigned surprise. "What do I behold?" he cried. "What dreadful ravages has fire made here? To whom did this unlucky house belong? And when was it consumed?" Don Luis de Luana, having replied to these two questions, thus continued, "This fire is less spoken of in the town on account of the great damage it has done than the circumstance which attended it, and of which I will tell you. The Signor Don Pedro de Ascalano has an only daughter who is lovely as the day. They say that she is in a room all filled with fire and smoke, in which it seems certain she must perish, but that nevertheless her life was saved by a youthful cavalier whose name I have not heard. It forms the subject of conversation throughout Madrid, and the young man's daring is lauded to the skies. It is believed that as a reward for his success, however humble my generation may be, he may well hope to gain a life of interest in the daughter of the dawn." Leandro Perez listened to Don Luis without appearing to take the slightest interest in what he heard. Then, getting rid of his friend under some specious pretext, he gained the Prado, where, seating himself beneath a tree, he was soon plunged in profound reverie. The devil first came flitting through his mind. "Ah, my dear Asmodeus," he exclaimed, "I cannot too much regret you. You in the moment would have borne me around the world, and with you should I have journeyed without any of the usual devilries of travelling. Gentle spirit, you are a loss indeed. But," he added a moment afterwards, "my loss perhaps is not quite irreparable, Why should I despair of seeing the demon again? It may fall out, as he himself suggested, that the magician will shortly restore him to the freedom and to me. And the devil left his mind, and the lady entered it, upon which he resolved at once to seek Don Pedro in the temporary abode, moved principally by curiosity to see the lovely Serafina. As soon as he appeared before the Don Pedro, that signor rushed toward him with open arms and embraced him, exclaimed, "Welcome, generous cavalier. I began to feel angry at your absence. What, said I, Don Cleophas, after the pressing invitation which I gave him to my house, still have shunned my sight? He ill indeed repays the impatience of my soul to testify for him the friendship and esteem which fill it." Zambulo bowed respectfully at this kindly objurgation, and in order to excuse his seeming coldness, replied to the old man that he had feared to incommode him in the confusion with the event of the preceding day must have occasioned. "I cannot listen to such an excuse," resumed Don Pedro. "You can never be unwelcome in a house which but your noble conduct would have been a house of mourning indeed." But he added, "Follow me, if you please. You have other thanks than mine to receive." And taking the student's hand, he led him to the apartment of Serafina. "My child," said Don Pedro, as he entered the room where this lady was reposing from the noonday heat, I present to you the gentleman who so courageously saved your life. Show to him now, if you can, how deeply sensible you are in the obligation of the conferred, since the danger from which he rescued you deprived you of the power to do so on the spot. On this, the Signora Serafina, opening a mouth of roses to express the gratitude of her heart to Leandro Perez, paid him in compliments so warm and graceful as would charm my readers as much as they did this blushing object. Could I repeat each honeyed word? But as they have not been faithfully reported, I think it better to omit them altogether, than chance to spoil them by my own imperfect knowledge of such matters. I will only say that Don Cleophas thought he beheld and listened to some bright divinity, and that he was at once the victim of his eyes and ears. To say that he loved her in this thing, of course, but far from regarding the beauteous form before him as a possession to which he might aspire, his heart foreboded, despite all that the demon had assured him, that they would never pay at such the price the service they imagined him to have rendered. As their charms increased in their effects upon his mind, doubts teasing came threatening to destroy the infant hope, first cherished child of love. What completed his mystification on the subject was that Don Pedro, during the lengthened conversation, which ensured not once even touched upon the tender theme, but contented himself with a loading him of the civilities, without hinting in the slightest degree that he had any desire for the honor of his relationship. Serafina, too, as polite as her father, while she did not fail in expressions of the deepest gratitude, dropped no one word whose magic charm would serve Zambulo to conjure visions of wedding joys, so that our student left the Signor Escalano and his daughter with love as his companion, but leaving hope behind him. "Osmodius, my friend," he muttered, as he walked along, as the devil still were by his side, "when you assured me that Don Pedro was disposed to adopt me as his son-in-law, and that Serafina's burned with passion lighted in her heart by you for me, it must have pleased you to make merry at my cost, or else you know as little of the present time of that which is to come." He now regretted that he had ever seen the dangerous beauty, and looking on the love which filled his breast as an unhappy passion which he ought to stifle in its infancy, he resolved to set about it in earnest. He even reproached himself for having desired to gain his point, supposing he found her the father all disposed to give his daughter to him, and represented to himself that it would have been disgraceful to have owed his happiness to a deception like that he had projected. He was yet occupied with these reflections when Don Pedro, having sent to seek him on the following day, said to him, Signor Leandro Perez, it is in time I prove to you by deeds that in obliging me you have not to do with one of those who repay a benefit in courtly phrases. You saved my daughter, and I wish that she herself should recompose the peril you encountered for her sake. I have consulted Serafina thereupon, and find her ready to obey my will. Nay, I can say with pride, I recognized her for my child indeed when I proposed that she should give her hand to him who saved her life. She showed her joy by the transports, which at once convinced my soul her generosity responds to mine. It is settled, therefore, that you shall marry with my daughter. After having spoken thus, the good Signor de Escalano, who reasonably expected that Don Cleophas would have gone down on his knees to thank him for so great a boon, was sufficiently surprised to find him speechless, and displaying an evident embarrassment. Speak, Zambulo, he at length exclaimed. What am I to infer from the confusion of my proposition to you have occasioned? What possible objection can you have? What private gentleman, although respectable, to refuse an alliance which a noble would have courted? Has then the honor of my house some blemish of which I am ignorant? Signor, replied Leandro, I know too well the space that heaven has between us. Why then, returned Don Pedro, have you to care so little for a marriage which does you so much honor? Confess, Don Cleophas, you have some maiden and you have so much honor. Confess, Don Cleophas, you love some maiden and have pledged your faith. And it is your honor now which bars you your road to fortune. Had I, replied the student, a mistress to whom my vows had bound my future fate, it is not fortune that should bid me break them. But it is no such tie that now compels me to reject your proffered bounty. Honor, it is true, compels me to renounce the glorious destiny that you would tempt me with. But far from seeking to abuse your kindness, I am about to undeceive you to my own undoing. I am not the deliverer of Serafina. What do I hear? Exclaimed Don Pedro in utter astonishment. It was not you who rescued Serafina from the flames which threatened her with instant death? It was not Don Cleophas who had courage to risk his life to save her? No, Signor, replied Zambullo. Mortal man would have vainly essayed to shield her from fate. Learn that it was a devil to whom you owe your daughter's life. These words only increased the astonishment of Don Pedro, who, not conceiving that he was to understand them literally, entreated the student to explain himself, upon which Leandro, regardless the loss of the demon's friendship, related all that had passed between Asmodeus and himself. Having finished, the old man resumed and said to Don Cleophas, the confidence you have reposed in me confirms me in my design of giving you my daughter. You were her chief deliverer. Had you not thus entreated the devil, whom you speak of, to snatch her from the death which menaced her, it is clear he would have suffered her to perish. It is you, then, who preserved the life of Serafina, which cannot be better devoted than to the happiness of your own. You deserve her, and I again offer you her hand with the half of my estate. Leandro Perez, at these words, which removed all his conscientious scruples, threw himself at the feet of Don Pedro to thank him for his generosity. In a few weeks, the marriage was celebrated with the magnificence suitable to the disposal of the heir of Signor de Escalano, and to the great satisfaction of the relations of our student, who was thus amply repaid for the few hours' freedom he procured for the devil on two sticks. That was fun, right? That was a good one. So I may or may not be here next week. As you know, I will be in Boston next week. I will bring the book with me, and we will, if I am available, I will read. Let's see who we have here. Now, Mike Pope, hello. Christy Cragen, hello. Mary Jane King, hello. Glad to see you on here tonight. Thank you. Siobhan Ding. Christy, something fun to do. Gracious good evening. Good evening, Mr. John Maxwell. Sinstar Music Studio, Lord Richard-Lael. How are you? I'm doing well, thank you. I love story time. Thank you so much. Greetings, my friend. Good evening, Richard-Lael. Good evening, all. Lunalicious, hello. Camilla Vaughn, hello. Sam Zog. Very artistic tie and suit combo. Thank you. Paranormal XL podcast. Hello. I can't pronounce this one, but hello. Lauren Morgan Richards. Hello. Looking and sounding snazzy. The themes. Hi. Let's see who we have here. Let's see what we have. If we have any special messages. Not yet. Not yet. Anyway, that's all I have for you, my lovelies. Have a beautiful evening. I love you much, and I will see you later. Good night.